Ladies and gents, welcome back to the first video in a new series called Gameplay Loop, where we investigate gameplay elements and systems commonly used in MMOs, what's good about them, what's bad about them, and why they are used in the first place. So sit back, grab yourself a beverage, as we're going to be looking into leveling and leveling systems, why they exist, and what they did well. So today we're going to be diving into leveling. Yes, that's right, leveling in games. And I think it's probably a good time to start discussing where leveling came from. Now, after extensive research on the internet, everything points to one game, Dungeons & Dragons. Now, while it's heavily debated whether this is or isn't the first implementation of leveling as opposed to levels in a game, it seems to be the general consensus that this is where it all started. A tabletop role-playing game with individual progression per player. And that bit's important. Dungeons & Dragons was formed in 1974 and is one of the earliest examples that I can find of leveling being used in games. Now, while this is a board game and not a digital game, this is still the earliest implementation of a leveling system that I could find. Now, the concept behind why the leveling system was so important and needed is actually quite simple. Players are not tied to their group of friends. They are not tied to the campaign they are currently playing. They can move their character from any campaign to any other campaign just like that. And it's important to have an individual progression system tied to that character alone and not the entire party. Now, this is a trend we will see continuing forward. When digital games decided to take on this concept, it was very much for the same reason. With many players in the same world, for example like RuneScape or World of Warcraft, individual player progression systems were required. You couldn't have everybody doing the same thing just because one person had unlocked it, and that seems kind of obvious. And it's not really until you think about it that it makes sense. So, as mentioned, early implementations of a leveling system had one purpose and one purpose only: to give players individual progression and tracking of that progression. Because in the medium of video games, players are able to go back to previous areas and even go to areas that they have not yet unlocked or completed. And they needed a way to distinguish how far players have progressed in that area. But obviously, the progression could not be tied to that area, so it had to become tied to the player, hence the term leveling. And the concept's not that wild, really. If you look at games like Sonic and Tails on the PlayStation or earlier consoles, the players of that game are on a level. They are on level 1, they move to level 2, then 3, then 4. And progress is easier to track. However, that progress is tied to the game world itself, not to the individual players in that game. And for a game like Sonic and Tails, that is absolutely fine. It's a two-player game, and it's not really a big deal. So, now that we've discussed that the main concept of this was individual player progression, many early online games took this system and ran with it. They used this to distinguish how well a player was doing, how far into the game they were, and what they could do with that level. Now, in recent days, recent years, even the last decade I would say, the concept of leveling has completely changed. Once a player progression system, it has now become a kind of time gate. It has now become a long road until the end game, and quite often, the long road to the end game is utterly boring. It's void of content. It is a time gate to stop you from getting to the good stuff early on, therefore increasing your playtime. And the general sentiment behind the leveling process has drastically changed, especially in the MMO industry. Let's take a look at World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is a game that over the recent years have started to lose their path with this. And if anything, the leveling experience has become numb. Utterly numb. If you are a player of World of Warcraft, you will know that there is essentially nothing to do until you reach max level. So when you're talking to friends and you start the game for the first time, the advice that you're given is to get to max level. That's the only goal. And the reason for that is because there is not really any content between first level and last level. Blizzard were aware of this situation and this problem that was brewing, and in a response to that, they made leveling past the early levels all the way up to the top level fast, like really fast. And in doing so, they made that leveling process even more devalued. Because now, by the time you get to level 30, Well, you're only 25 minutes away from level 31, and you could go and grind out some really cool gear for the level 30 that you're currently at. But the item that you're going to grind out could take half an hour to an hour to obtain. Now remember, I just said you were about 25 minutes away from the next level. That level will devaluate that item that you just gained. So the player mentality here is, do I spend 25 minutes to level up my character, or do I spend 30 minutes to half an hour to gain an item that will give me extra power for the next 25 minutes of leveling? To the average Joe, to me and you, the answer is really simple. No, I should just level up. And this is a kind of recursion loop that you will see through the leveling process. Every level that you get to is always closer to the next level than it is to getting the item for that level. And this has simultaneously devalued gear during leveling. It's almost non-essential. You pick up whatever you can, you never really hunt for anything, you just equip whatever the best thing is that you've picked up. Now, this is where it's really important to realise the leveling system that was created for games is actually the cornerstone of player progression. Think about it like this. In every MMO, gear is tied to a level requirement to equip. So everything rests on top of the leveling system. If you devalue the leveling system in your game, you devalue everything that's connected to it, which, believe it or not, is a lot more than you could actually imagine. So now, the player progression system that seems to be the main one used in MMOs today is gear past max level. And most games echo this sentiment. Gearing doesn't even matter, the equipment you wear does not matter until you reach max level, and then it matters. You'll see this same sentiment in World of Warcraft, Terra, Black Desert Online, Arcade, and to be honest, Final Fantasy to a certain extent. Nothing you do before max level matters because you'll be getting away from those levels so quickly. So, what's the solution? The solution may actually seem incredibly counterintuitive, because when I explain what I think the solution is, you'll probably want to blow your brains out. But hear me out on this. I believe the solution to making level more meaningful in every game, or most games, I believe the solution is actually to make levels longer to obtain. As I previously mentioned, in World of Warcraft, it can take 15 to 25, 30 minutes to level up. Now, let's use another example of why the mid-game doesn't work because of this system. Let's say there is a creature at level 30 that gives you a really cool rare drop. Now, you could farm it at level 30 to get this mount or this pet, and that's content at that level that you can do. But the power gained from leveling in games like World of Warcraft is practically exponential. You will gain an extra 5% power for leveling up from 30 to 31. Now, if you leveled up from 30 to 33, that's about 15% power increase over your current level, which means you'll be 15% more efficient at farming that content from the earlier level, and it will only take you around an hour to an hour and a half to get that level. So why wouldn't you? Because that 15% power increase directly translates to 15% faster farming. So you would be insane to not do that. And hey, why stop at level 32 or 33? Why not get level 40 and be roughly 30% better, 40% better? And the answer is, yeah, why wouldn't you? You'd go and do that because it's an internal conflict of efficiency. So players aren't able to actually enjoy the game at any level. They're constantly feeling that internal pressure to get to a higher level because they're just wasting time if they don't. Now, a game that I'd like to use as an example for how this was done very, very right is actually RuneScape, and I use this example quite often because I know many people can relate to this or have played the game at some point. RuneScape's leveling system is possibly one of the most RPG leveling systems I've ever seen, and it feels like it's done so well, because at no point are you ever feeling the pressure to reach max level. Reaching max level can take years, quite literally take years for the average player. And because of that, you don't feel the need to get to max level. The game doesn't start at max level. At any level in the game, you can go and do content. Meaningful content, and that content will still be meaningful once you do reach max level. I use what is called a horizontal progression system alongside a vertical progression system. Now, what does that mean? A vertical progression system is where rewards always beat out the last reward. Think World of Warcraft. You get a robe top for your mage at level 10. Well, the one at level 12 is going to be better than the one at level 10, and you will throw the level 10 one away. There is never a reason to keep it. It is indefinitely better. A horizontal progression system is where the rewards are more niche rewards. So in RuneScape, let's use an example of a level 40 plate body. Now, you can go and do a quest after that to get a different level 40 plate body. One of them may have a better crush bonus, meaning that it's better for use with maces and mauls. The other one may have a stab bonus, meaning it's better for rapiers and two-handed swords. So they are both equally good, but for different situations. And this opens up so much more avenue for a reward without devaluing the previously done content. And this is the important part of a slow leveling system. A slower leveling system means you can pace rewards at a much better rate, at a much more meaningful rate, and have them all still be useful, or the majority still be useful, many levels down the line. Now, you can still use a hybrid solution between vertical and horizontal. Not everything has to be made equally. You can still have plate bodies that are better than that level 40 plate body, but you shouldn't be instantly replacing them. You should be able to give the player some longevity in the initial level 40 plate body. Otherwise, it just feels like a grab it and toss it kind of reward. And it doesn't really feel like a reward at all, because you're not going to get the use out of it. So, in RuneScape, between longer leveling times and the next important point, which is minuscule rewards in power between levels, they have a leveling system that is going to last a lifetime, I believe. Because with levels taking a long time to gain, and the reward of power between those levels, like the just straight up numbers that your character gets as stats, well, they're small. Big time for small power increase. This puts players into that state of just not worrying about leveling up, not feeling that they have to. And it also solves another really important problem that many MMOs are facing today. I don't know many, if any, MMOs that have recently launched where a level 30 player and a level 40 player can do content together and be somewhat on the same scale of power. It just doesn't happen. It can't happen. Because as I previously mentioned, in World of Warcraft, that 5% increase per level, or roughly 5% increase, puts a massive void between a level 30 and a level 40 player. Also, in those games, they quite often completely lock off content until you reach a level. I think this is a really poor game design choice. For example, there's a level 40 dungeon and you need to be level 40 to go into that dungeon. Now, while that makes sense to us all and just seems very logical, why shouldn't a level 30 player be able to go in there? It's going to be way more difficult for them, but they should be able to also earn the reward if they have the skills and class knowledge to complete that content. At the end of the day, they had to put in a lot more effort and a lot more time to do it, so why not reward them with the same reward as the level 40 player? This is something that RuneScape also does. You can do almost any content at any level, and this has spawned some absolutely insane accomplishments in the RuneScape community. Just for a quick example, the Fight Caves is a really mid to high level piece of content that will reward the player with a fire cape. The fire cape was always a kind of staple item in RuneScape, and it was kind of a sign of authority back in the day. Now, most players have to be around level 70 to 80 combat to complete this achievement, and this is where the challenge came from. What's the lowest level fire cape you can get in the game? Now, if you're not a RuneScape player, you may be horrified to find out that a level 3 player, the lowest combat level that you can be in RuneScape, has achieved the fire cape through completely legitimate means. And you may be thinking, well, surely the game developers should patch it so that you can't do it at that level and take that item away. And I would argue no. The accomplishment of doing that was way harder than anything I've ever seen in any other game. It was thought to be impossible. Hundreds of hours of theory crafting, thousands of hours in attempts, and the concentration of a saint was put into getting this fire cape on a level 3 account. If you run a game, or a game company, or an MMO, you should be celebrating this, as RuneScape did. Because yeah, sure he was about 70 levels below the recommended, but you know what? He achieved it. And these are the epic moments that these kind of systems create. When leveling isn't used to separate people, it's actually bringing them together, just not in the way they intended. And I'd love to see more companies do that. Now, there's something I want to touch on here to kind of show how bad the leveling systems have got in games, and to really back up and drive home the point that it is just a time gate to the end game. When companies are making their leveling process faster and faster and faster, increasing XP rates to get you through those levels, this shows that their system was flawed from the beginning. There is no content during that leveling process, and they know that. They are aware that it is just a time gate to the end game. And there's something further to back that up. World of Warcraft in recent years released the level boost. The level boost will take you to almost max level, or at least to the starting level of the most recent content. And the reason behind this is very simple: money. No, well, sort of, maybe. But it also shows that they have created a problem, which is leveling is boring, it's void of content, and it's just a means to an end. Nobody wants to do that leveling process in a lot of games, they just want to play the game, which they realistically cannot do until max level. So they've created the problem, and they've sold you the solution. They know their leveling experience is dire. They know it's awful. The harder solution to this problem would have been to make leveling meaningful. Give it content. Make the levels take longer. Maybe have less levels, but make them take longer. So that there's less of a power gap, and there's more time for you to relax and actually do stuff at each level, rather than leveling just being a carrot on a stick that is always just a few inches from your face. In RuneScape, I was a person who used to power level. Every game I've played, I've rushed to max level, and RuneScape was really a breath of fresh air for me. I could get to level 30 and just chill at level 30 for 3 weeks, doing content that I found enjoyable, that I found meaningful. And I never had that carrot dangling in front of my face saying, but the next level's only 5 minutes away and you could be 10% more powerful, why don't you just do that? Sure, I could level up and become more powerful, but the time it would take me to do that wouldn't necessarily benefit the grind that I was currently on, because I knew that the grind I was doing right now would still be relevant a year down the line. And I could do those grinds, I could do those mini games, I could do those bosses with friends and just enjoy them. I would love to see the statistics on this, because I have a theory. If you look at games like Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, Black Desert Online, Terra, and generally any other MMO, what percentage of the active community is at max level? Because I would say it's the majority of the active players. Because if you're not at max level, you've got nothing to do, or you've got very little to do, and you know that you should be at max level, because it's going to open up everything. It opens up the end game, which is a topic I want to get into in a little bit. However, if you look at RuneScape, I would say the minority is at max level. And that's okay, because the content isn't all hidden at max level. That's a weird thing to experience, and if you think about it, it's completely backwards. Having the end game content be the content, I mean, realistically, getting to max level should be when you realise, okay, I've done it, I've completed it, everything is done. But for most games, it's not. In RuneScape, I would say that the majority of players, I'd say about 40 to 50% of them are around mid-level, around the 50 to 90 mark in combat level. It would be really interesting to get stats on this, and I might even reach out to a Jagex moderator at some point to try and get the stats for this video. But moving on to how this problem occurred, and why games like World of Warcraft do this. Well, it's quite simple. Their system for leveling up is almost exclusively through quests. One-time quests. Whereas games like RuneScape actually give you XP for practically everything you do. Even when you're doing things that should just be for fun, you get XP for doing that. While yes, you can get XP rewards from quests, that's not the main way of doing it. And the problem lies here. In games like World of Warcraft, the methods of gaining XP are almost unrepeatable. They are one-time things, which means if they want to make the leveling experience longer, they have to make twice as many, 3 times as many, 10 times as many quests. And their quests are already very meaningless. Go fetch 10 bear hides and bring them back to me. Imagine doing that 10 times as much. And the reality of why they don't do this is simply that. It would take them a lot more time to develop content for those levels. Now, there's something noteworthy here. Companies like Blizzard don't actually want you to enjoy the leveling experience. I know that sounds really counterintuitive. They don't want you to spend time there. They want you to get past it quick. And this is primarily backed up by one thing: Have you noticed whenever there's an expansion or an update to World of Warcraft, they never add content for the lower to mid levels? It's always at the end of the game. And this is causing a kind of feedback loop. They're seeing statistics that people are enjoying the end game content, so they're putting more content there. But the reality of it is, it's not that people are enjoying the end game content, they're just not enjoying the mid-level and early level content, because there is none. The only content from early to late game is the path from early to late game. So you really have no choice but to do that. This is a trend that I would like to see switched up a bit in coming years. I feel like the current design for leveling in games is kind of harmful and almost void. There's almost no need for a level system in games like this. You could almost do the same thing by locking requirements behind quests and just not having a level there. The level is almost a vanity badge. Most of your stats come from gear anyway, and level is just a number. I feel the leveling system is a system that was designed for a very specific purpose and has kind of aged past that purpose now for a lot of games. A lot of games keep it because it is a staple of MMO and RPG genres. And I think a lot of them don't stop to think why they're still using leveling systems. Because if they did, they'd probably realize very quickly that there's almost no reason. Or that they're trying to create a reason to keep using it and it's just not working. If the time between levels isn't meaningful, the levels themselves are not meaningful. So, in conclusion today, the leveling system was created to be a personal progression system, to give meaning to all the actions that your player or your character does throughout its life. A sign that you have put in time and hard work, and that you are rewarded for it. And over the years and decades, it has changed from a progression system into a time gate. Leveling is no longer the journey. Leveling is the requirement before the journey. Ladies and gentlemen, I really hope you've enjoyed this first video in the new series. I'm hoping to continue this series as more of a stick it on your second monitor while you're playing games and just listen to it in the background. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe. Also, turn that little pesky bell notification on. It massively helps. As always, a massive thank you to the patrons. And after this, I'm going to be live over on Twitch. So drop by and say hi. If that's not for you, totally understandable, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.